Hello, Hey Boomer listeners. Welcome to October 12th and our discussion today about thriving with ADHD in your career and in your life. October happens to be ADHD Awareness Month. So this is a perfect time for us to have this discussion with my friend and ADHD career coach, Shel Mendelson. I will bring her on in just a minute. So let me just tell you a few of the challenges that people with ADHD as adults and probably as children, but we're talking adults today, may be experiencing. They may have trouble getting organized or actually even starting on tasks. There may be difficulty sustaining their focus and their effort on the work that they're doing. Managing alertness or emotional interference becomes a challenge. Managing one's actions without excessive impulsivity affects some people with ADHD. And setting priorities sometimes becomes a challenge. So having ADHD often means living with increased stress or processing your stress in unique ways. The challenges that I mentioned can contribute to a sense of overwhelm, feeling out of control, relationship difficulties, and underperformance at work. There is still a lot of research to be done on what are the causes for ADHD. Some of the information that I found indicated that 70 to 80% of the cases have some kind of hereditary component. And then there also seems to be environmental factors, such as events that occur before birth or stresses that you experience during your childhood. It is thought that this combination of events and factors alter your brain development early in life. But like I said, there's still a lot of research going on about this. Before I bring Shel on, I just wanted to tell you about a couple of things. First is that we had our first community gathering last Thursday. It was amazing. We had some wonderful conversation. I was so grateful for the people that joined us. And we have two more in that series, but I will be scheduling future community gatherings in the not too distant future. I also wanted to tell you that I am open to taking a few clients for the Return Your Retirement Upside Down program that I wrote. This program will help you to regain your focus, your direction, your energy, and your enthusiasm for what comes next in your life. It's an 8-week program. The way it works is you will receive a new module every week. There's quite a bit of work for you to do, but I know you're not afraid of a little work. And then we will meet weekly to discuss what your insights were and what we can do to keep you moving forward. So if that's something that you think you would be interested in, or you have more questions about, you can send me an email at heyboomer0413@gmail.com. And I will get back to you just as soon as possible. Just a reminder, you all are such an important part of the Hey Boomer community. And as you know, Shel and I will be having this conversation, but what I really want is for you to participate as well. So join in the conversation, be part of the community, enter your questions in the chat, and we will do our best to answer them just as soon and as quickly as possible. And if for some reason we can't answer your question during the broadcast, then I will forward them to Shel and we will put together the answers for you. Okay, so let me bring Shel on. Hi, Shel.
Hey, Wendy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great.
Good.
Morning.
Love your necklace.
Yeah.
So
very happy to be here.
Yes. Well, and I'm so happy to have you here. As I mentioned in the beginning, Shell and I became friends years ago. 2005 is when I got my Kids Art franchise, and Shell was the founder and CEO of Kids Art. And so we became friends then and recently reconnected. And so I am super excited to have you here. And as I mentioned, Shell Mendelson is a career counselor and coach focusing on adults with ADHD in their lives and their careers. She has over 30 years of experience and education in the career counseling and coaching arena. Shell brings counseling, coaching, teaching, training, and nurturing gifts to help her clients focus, and focus is the key word here, focus on defining, illuminating, creating, and transforming the lack of clarity to a well-defined career or business choice. Shell was diagnosed in 2008 with ADHD, and she has a deep awareness of how this impacts one's work and life experience. She offers a 40-year proven system designed to help adults with ADHD, and we're going to talk more about that. And before we get started, I just want to mention that ADHD is a neurological condition, and Shell is not an MD. She's not a psychiatrist. So we are going to talk about how she works with adults and how ADHD may show up for you as an adult, but we are not going to talk about medication, and we're not going to talk about diagnosis or anything like that. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there anything I left out, Shell?
I think it'll come out in our conversation. So you're good.
Awesome.
You're good. Yeah.
So you started in career coaching and counseling many, many years ago. Yeah. We don't have to say how many.
A lot.
So what interested you in that? How did you get started in that area?
Well, it started pretty much after I started grad school when I was 29 years old, and I went into counseling. And I chose vocational rehabilitation counseling at the time, which is a career focus for people with disabilities, because there weren't that many people applying, and I wanted to be a counselor. So I saw that in the general, I know it's crazy, but in the general counseling program, there was an overabundance of women who were applying. And in the voc rehab program, it was more specialized. So I thought, well, I'm going to go for a specialization and still get the coaching and counseling aspect of it. So, right, smart move on my part, because out of my entire class, every single person went to work in the field. And it was when I got my career, I went right to work for my internship. The people hired me that I worked for. And I worked for 10 years in vocational rehabilitation in the workers' comp area. And I helped people who were injured on the job find alternative work that they could do within their limitations. And I enjoyed doing that for 10 years until I didn't anymore. And part of it was I just got bored of it. And I saw that the whole field was changing. I was living in California where it was mandated, so it made it easy to get work. And I could see the writing on the wall that it was too expensive, and that, all of the political parties were going to get together and mandate it right out the window at some point. And I was on the board of the rehab counselors in California, and I tried to educate people around that. Went to Sacramento to lobby for us and all that, but it was like, it was pretty much the writing was on the wall that it was going to go out the window. And I saw that coming years before it actually did. So during the process, I decided I really wanted to work with just people who wanted to shift their careers. And I didn't want the limitations piece of it necessarily. I wanted to work with everyone. And I didn't want to have to work with lawyers and courts and, all the other bureaucracy that you have to work with, and that was pretty much what bored the hell out of me. Excuse me, but that was the part that really was like not only stressful, but something I wasn't interested in doing anymore.
So that was the workers' comp side of things.
That was the workers' comp side of things. And I did work with the veterans for a while. I had a contract with them, and that was fabulous. I love working with the vets. But that was a contract that it ended when I moved, actually. We ended up moving to Arizona, but I ended up working with the veterans in Arizona too for a while. And that was really a good piece of it. I enjoyed that. But I also wanted to start my own business working with folks doing career coaching and counseling. And I've always been a counselor. So that piece of it was very simple for me, very easy and very natural.
So that's when you shifted to your own career counseling business, not
My
Kids
own
Art
career.
yet. Okay.
No, not Kids Art yet. My son, Jake, who you know, you remember Jake.
I do know Jake.
He's now 27 years old, and he's got a couple of kids of his own. So things have changed. Anyway, he was only 5 years old at the time when I was living in Arizona. And I was working part-time doing the career work with the vets. And I hadn't really started my regular parachute work until actually when I moved to Texas. So I got that training. I got parachute training, which was my next step in sort of evolving to doing work with the general population.
Can
And
you talk more about, I don't think most people know what you're talking about with parachute training.
you don't? I'm just teasing.
I know because I talked to you. But
Yeah, no, I'm just teasing. So what color is your parachute is a career manual that has been published for the past 45 or so, maybe closer to 50 years. I'm not sure exactly how long it's been. But Richard Bowles was the author. He's like the granddaddy of all things career. And he put together a process that people go through to identify all the elements of what make up their ideal work. And at the time, there were a lot there, and there still are a lot of different processes for doing career work there. People give assessments, people do all kinds of things to help people with making decisions that are critical to them in terms of their career. This was the one that stuck with me. And so I spent a good deal of time with him in training, and it turned my whole life around, really. And I had to go through the process myself. In fact, I've gone through it twice. And both times, guess what I came up with as my direction?
you should be a career counselor. It's nice how that works.
Yeah. I mean, a few other things, and I've done some other things in my life, as you know. But this was the one that really was the key foundational area for me. And the way Kids Art came up was when Jake was 5. And I've always been very artistically oriented. I'm not an artist, but I always loved art. I love looking at art, going to museums, buying art. I mean, I just love art. So I've always been art-oriented person. And I saw that there was a need for art because it was being taken out of the schools. And it just kind of came out of this frustration that I had about where's the art for children? Why is it being taken out? To this day, it's being taken out, and it probably is gone in a lot of schools. It's probably not even anything kids are able to do unless they take an outside course of some kind. And the same with theater. All these artistic endeavors seem to be lower on the totem pole and not given as much credence as the hardcore academic subjects like math and science and all those. So it's like one part of your brain is literally as a child not being developed in school. Mm-hmm. And that angered me. It made me mad. And I don't know, one day I just woke up with the idea, the name Kids Art, and the idea for a business. And things evolved. It took many years, actually. It was only the very beginning of it. But the idea, the name Kids Art stuck with me. And so I went about trademarking that. And so how I started out was I would have kids come to my house. I set up tables. I had art supplies. They would do, we would do different activities, which I brought into Kids Art, many of them, by the way. And I just found really cool, fun, and I always have to do things outside of the box. I never like the typical stuff that people do. As you know, in Kids Art, we brought a lot of that to Kids Art. Yeah. And so I just experimented a little bit, and it went fabulous. It was great. And I had fun. My son had fun at the time. Anyway, so that just evolved. And then finally I brought my friend from childhood, Chris, into it. And she was an artist who had been teaching art on her own and teaching her own version for many years. And she was very successful at it. So eventually we got around to the idea of coming together and doing a business. It hadn't been formulated as a franchise at that point, but we knew we wanted to do something. And so we hired a business coach, and we were finally we led ourselves essentially to the idea of doing a franchise system. And honestly, we did it all wrong. In the beginning, we did it completely wrong. But I found if we hadn't done it the way we did it, it never would have happened, which happens a lot for people with ADHD, by the way. If we follow the rules, we'll never do it. If we have to do exactly what it says to do, follow the instructions, we might not ever do it because they're too tedious. There's too much. It becomes overwhelming. And I know for a fact that if I had been presented with what it takes to form a franchise the right way from the very beginning, it never would have happened. So we had to backtrack. Once we brought people on board who were our initial investors, actually, we were able to develop it into a franchise the right way. We brought the right attorneys on. We did the uniform, whatever it is. The document. Yeah. At that time, it was the UFOC, but it's something something else now. Franchise agreement, and it was like life changed dramatically after that, and we started getting some traction. Actually, when my ex-husband came on board as the operations manager, and we started focusing solely on doing what we need to do to get the franchise set up. And I ended up selling the first 25 myself, franchises.
Oh, wow.
I did. Well, I was the founder, right? So I founded it. I brought all the people together. Chris took on the curriculum portion of it. She's a fabulous artist. She developed her own curriculum for it. And it just kept going and going and going, which was part of the problem eventually for me. Was that?
Yeah. So I want you to talk about that. I mean, it was a great program because it was very holistic. It wasn't just about the art. It was about the whole child and being able to correct mistakes and think outside the box and all of those things. And the kids in the classes.
Mistakes are okay. Mistakes
right?
Are okay.
Kids in the classes thrived, but yeah, I watched some of that from a distance as it peaked, and then I could see changes. And so how did that happen for you, and how did that affect you?
2008 hit, for one thing. And all the franchises were suffering at that point. And so I left in 2009. That's how long ago it's been. And at that point, I realized that we all had to take drastic cuts in our salaries. And it just became much more of a corporate entity for me than I was comfortable with. I did not enjoy the day-to-day anymore. I was undiagnosed at the time. So all of the symptomology of ADHD were coming over, the overwhelm, the stress, the disorganization, you name it, it all came barreling down on me. And I didn't know what was going on, and I couldn't understand why other people that I work with weren't going through that either. Just me. I was the one who was kind of the loose cannon, right? So I had entertained ideas of selling it to a company that was much better equipped and would have been much, in my opinion, much better for the franchisees overall, because they had the basis and could have really put the money and everything that the company deserved, the franchisees deserved into it. But I could not get consensus with my business partners, and we started to have some real serious issues. And at the time, though, I realized I was really unhappy. I was just basically unhappy. And I've never in my life been in a work situation that I did well in when I was not happy in the work that I was doing. And that's where people with ADHD 100% fall when it comes to the work that they're doing, if they're not enjoying what they're doing. And it just got to be that the day-to-day where I was doing tasks that I really disliked doing. And I mean, seriously disliked doing. And so I wasn't doing that great at it. It just wasn't fun. I wasn't doing that great. It was driving everybody crazy, definitely me, but other people as well. And it didn't end well.
Yeah.
If I had been diagnosed at the time, it probably would have taken a little bit different of a turn, in the sense that I would have recognized what was going on a little bit more and been able to manage some of the symptomology a little bit better. But overall, I just wanted out. I really did want out. So that's kind of what happened.
So it grew fast. The overwhelm hit. It became more corporate. Your symptoms of ADHD, which you didn't know what was going on, then became overwhelming.
Huge, overwhelming.
And created a lot of conflict internally.
A lot of conflict internally and externally, not just internally. And it impacted other people I was working with. I could give examples of that, but I think that would take too much time. I mean, we could do a whole podcast just on that.
Yeah, but I think it's important to kind of recap that so people listening can relate, and feel that, that other people experience this too. And when something becomes overwhelming or not fun, or, it seems out of control, there could be more to it than that.
Well, you have to understand, I was the founder and I was the CEO. And then I passed my CEO status on to somebody else who did things very, very different from the way I did. I didn't agree very much with the way it was being done. But I knew I had to pass it. And there weren't very many options, essentially. And so that was one of the things that was very, very frustrating for me, is to see your baby kind of taken in a whole different direction. And that all the ideas that I had were just being dismissed, basically.
Yeah, that's too bad.
That worked before, but what happened, especially, I don't want to interrupt you, except you did ask, how did it impact you? And how does this kind of thing impact other people? For me, I was working with some very organized people. I am not an organized person. I am a creative. Right? I'm a creative person. So all you creative people out there, you will relate to what I'm saying. So I would ask for something to be done, and I didn't know how to ask. So I would say, can you do this? This has to get done, or whatever. And instead of saying, what's your schedule like? Can you do, sort of work it in the way probably a normal person would? I would just kind of want to get it out of my head. So it came across as being demanding, and for them to put everything else they were doing aside and just do what I wanted them to do. And then the resentment started to build up. And I didn't realize it was happening. I just wanted it out of my head and out there so that it would get done. And I mean, obviously I would do things a lot differently now, but then I do understand how it impacted other people. It was hard for me to spend a lot of time praising because I just wanted to get stuff done. That was my main thing. And I had a lot of things that I saw needed to get done. And I think anybody with ADHD could probably relate to this part. You may not be the CEO or founder of a company, but you're in a work environment where you just want to get things done. So you may be doing it a bit too quickly or differently than other people would do it. And other people don't really may not understand why you're doing it a particular way. And without having the management ability or the ability to step back and say, maybe I should think about how I'm going about this specific task. And maybe how is it impacting other people?
So, yeah, that's really good insight, Shell. That's really good insight. So once you left Kids Art in 2009, how long did it take you, or what was the transition like to getting back into career coaching and focusing on ADHD?
Well, oddly enough, that's a great question. Oddly enough, I was thinking, I got to a point where I was literally missing working with clients so badly because it had been so long at that point since I actually had. And I was just so strongly missing it. And I had a friend who had a son with ADHD that I started working with, who slowly got me back into it. And it was a miracle because he was just to give you an example, he had just been fired as a bartender. And he was at his lowest low. And I could relate to that because I had been at my lowest low. And it was just, to backtrack just a little bit, my lowest low was when Kids Art ended and I had spent all these years building it up. It was something that, it was very sad. And I was angry, sad, relieved in a lot of ways, but every emotion you can imagine. But I really hit bottom at that point. And to the point where I remember sitting in my home and literally crawling to the bookshelf where this particular friend with a son who was a therapist had sent me a book 2 years earlier on ADD, and I put it in, I refused to even look at it. I remember laughing, putting it in the drawer. And I went right to that book and I put my hands on it and I opened it up and it had a checklist in it, and it was life-changing. I wish I could remember. It was either Dr. Amen or you guys. It was one of the famous ADHD experts. Can't exactly remember the name, but anyway, so when all the emotions that you have when you recognize that you're not alone in this thing, that there are other people who are going through the exact same situation or similar situation or have a lot of the same characteristics. It was a big relief on one hand, and it was also scary as heck on the other hand. So I went through every emotion there. But it was the best thing that could have happened to me, and that's when her son needed help. Everything worked out perfectly. And I work with him very much more than I do my normal clients because it was my first foray back into it. So I was able to spend more time with him. And today he is working as an executive with Facebook. An executive.
Wow.
I'm sure he's there. Now he may have left there. That was the last I had heard. He was working with Facebook. So he went from fired bartender and then there were a few jobs in between, but each one of them took him one step further to where he is today. And they were each foundational. In other words, got him on the right track, and he was able to move from that point forward.
So that's a great success story. But the question comes to mind, Shell, like I just looking at my own life, right? So I will learn something, and then in times of stress or whatever, I kind of slip back into old habits. And then it's like, oh yeah, I learned that once before. Let me learn that again. So when you're working with a client and giving them the skills for how to manage their ADHD in their life or their work, how do they retain that, or do they need like refreshers? How do they retain that? Now he's this executive. How does that work?
Well, for one thing, I don't do that in my work.
Okay.
I don't do that. That's not the only thing I do.
Mhm.
I shouldn't say I don't do it. I do it, but it's within the context of developing a career direction. So as you know, life happens in between. So you get to see all the way they manage the whole process that we're going through. And how they manage that really tells me a lot about what they need in terms of ADHD coaching. So it comes up within the process of doing the career work because life happens. So then as they become more confident and able to say yes to certain things and no to other things, the excuses go away. Not that they're making excuses for having ADHD, but the reasons they think they may be having problems become more manageable. They can start to see more clearly what it is that they can say yes to or should be saying yes to, and the things they should be saying no to, and without beating themselves up and with owning it. And with that comes quite a bit of confidence. A lot shifts in terms of just being able to see the whole brain wiring, and even to look at the way your brain is wired and feel good about it and say, I have this incredible skill that I can use that because I have this thing, right? So you can literally turn everything around. It certainly doesn't make all of the issues go away. It doesn't make you more organized. The only thing that's gonna when that happens is getting probably regular coaching over a long period of time and relearning skills so that it becomes second nature. And you start asking yourself and stepping back more than just being impulsive, which people with ADHD tend to be pretty impulsive.
Yeah.
Right. But it's a longer process. I have to say that it is a longer process for things to really land.
Yeah. And I think we constantly are like learning to the next level and then learning to the next level. So it would make sense that longer term coaching is probably in the cards for some people.
Well, for me, sometimes I will continue to work with people, and sometimes I'll recommend they go on and work with a straight on ADHD coach where that's all they're doing. They're just 100% focused on managing whatever the elements of ADHD are for them that get in the way. And that's different for everybody.
Yeah.
Some people, I've met ADHD people that are ultra organized, believe it or not, super organized, and go on to become organizers. I know, who knew? But other areas of their lives might be out of control, or they feel like they're out of control. And so it's just having an ADHD coach or somebody that's just focused on that. Once they've gotten their direction and they're starting to move towards that direction and actually maybe getting a job in it or going back to school for it or whatever they have to do to start moving forward. Once that happens, they can continue. I will continue to work with them on whatever is going on for them and coming up at that time. Or I will recommend for some people that they go on and work with an ADHD coach specifically.
So most of your focus is on helping them get clarity around a career,
Yes.
Correct? So can you talk a little bit about what that process looks like?
Well, I do use bowls. So it is creating essentially a roadmap by developing all the different elements of what make up one's ideal work, which are, I'll tell you what those are. Those are what people do you love working? And it's all about your preferences, okay? It's not necessarily about your strengths, because we all have strengths, but we don't all have to use those strengths in our work. In fact, in some cases, our strengths should be exactly what we don't use in our work if we don't enjoy using them. And I think about all the things that people say you should be good at, or you should do this, and you roll your eyes and go, I hate doing that.
But you're good at it.
But you're good at it, right? That's a strength, but it's not going to be a strength if you have to do it. It will become a weakness at some point. So we focus on your preferences in all the different elements that include the people that you work with or work for, the working conditions, and we dive very deeply into that one, especially because our conditions are everything. If we're in situations that don't allow us to be who we are to some extent, and to create an environment for ourselves that we're going to thrive in, then forget it. So we have to really dive very deeply into that part of it. Excuse me. I might need another one of those mints. And then there's the fields of, we call them the fields of fascination.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. What fields are you interested in? A lot of times people think, well, they think maybe very linearly, like I can just be an accountant, so I've got to be into math and numbers and things like that. But what if you also like business and art, or something? You can work maybe using those skills for an art-related business, right? So the fields of fascination, and everybody has like 3 or 4 that overlap with each other. We look at that and we combine those with the skills they love to use, right? And then we have the salary and rewards. Like, what rewards do you want to get from your work? Not just what the benefits are, but what actual rewards. Like, do you want to be considered a leader? Do you want to be, what are the things that are important to you when you go to work for somebody else, or if you work on your own? For me, maintaining my independence is number one, always will. And flexibility is another one. So it's not just salary. Like salary, we always get to the bottom line of what do you have to make to pay your bills. But also, the rewards and the benefits are also important. So identifying those. Then where do you want to live geographically? So I invite my clients to really go into all kinds of fantasies about where they want to live and why they want to live there. It doesn't mean you have to move, doesn't mean you have to do anything, but why not have that information available that you can access at any time and see yourself if that's something that's truly ideal for you, right? And then how many did I mention? I mentioned salary, people, working conditions, skills. Number 1, what are the skills that you prefer using the most? And those are really, we find we have many ways of getting at that information. There's more than one, by the way. And we talk about it, and we see it becomes like this great, wonderful puzzle that you become this detective. And what I find is that a lot of people with ADHD love research. They love being kind of a detective and putting the pieces together, synthesizing information. They really get to do this in this process with themselves.
That's cool.
They're not comparing themselves to other people, just you. So you're doing like this detective work on yourself. It's very much of a deep dive. It's very fun. Go ahead.
So a question came in. It says, what do you suggest for the young adult without the financial resources for private coaching, or someone who might live in a very rural area?
I'm sorry. I'm not laughing at you or the question. I'm just saying that is one of the questions. The only thing I can say at this point for me and working with me is I'm developing a group coaching program that's like a small percentage of what I would charge as an individual.
Didn't you call it something like parachute on steroids or something?
Yeah, it's parachute on steroids. And I'm putting together that program. It does cost money, but I'm open to negotiating for the right person. So if I interview you and you seem to be a good fit for this, I will consider lowering the amount for sure. This is COVID's time, and I do that. And I want to reach out to as many people as I can. I've been trying to figure out how I can do parachute for thousands of people. I haven't figured that out yet. If anyone has any clues, let me know.
Okay.
And I wouldn't charge hardly anything if I did it that way via Zoom or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can reach a lot of people, but it's
well, and I put your link in the chat. I'll show it right now, but I put it in the chat on Facebook and YouTube. So if people have questions about that, either your full program or the Parachute on Steroids program that you're developing, they can set up a time on your calendar to talk to you a little bit more about it, get some more information.
There's also a link on my website for online coaching, and there's a little form in there that you can fill out. So I would prefer that people actually go to that. You go to the services drop down and just click on the online coaching, and you can read through it. It shows you what there are 3 different modules. It's an 11-week program, and it will give you information on what's in the modules. And if you fill out the form, it gives me a little bit more information about you. And I understand it's really tough. I would say I'm working more with the 20 and 30-year-olds than I am with anyone else right now. I do have obviously clients of all ages, but I tend to get more, I'm getting more of the 20 to 30-year-olds right now.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I mean, that's a pretty tough time for them.
This is a time, this is this is a really hard time for Zoomers and millennials.
And you bring on that wisdom of us boomers to them. Absolutely. And the experience.
And I have a millennial son, so been there.
Yeah.
Been there.
Beth, get in touch with Shell if you want to talk further about this, and Doris also. Just one more quick question that I thought about. So when you're going through all of that, visualizing what's possible and where you want to live and who you want to work with and whatever, do you hit resistance of people going, well, yeah, that's great, but I don't see that as possible? Do you hit that kind of resistance, and how do you handle that?
Everyone has that resistance, or they wouldn't be contacting me in the first place. That's the thing. There is that resistance there, thinking I can't do what I really want to do, but I'm not willing to even explore what I can do within the realm of things that are really important to me and things that I really enjoy, right? And so one of the things that we do is we start with all the possibilities, and I don't want to see anything edited ever. We start way out here. My arms are way out here. And then we bring it in to what is possible and steps you can actually take. And if you start editing yourself, which everybody does, it's just the normal, we start listening to all the chatter out there and what our parents want us to do, what our friends think we ought to be doing, what we see our peers doing, but we're not doing. And we go, I can't do that. They get overwhelmed, especially with ADHD, right? You get overwhelmed thinking, how can I ever do anything I really want to do? Well, the truth is you're never going to if you don't look at every possibility and own it. So that's one of my big terms, is own what your preferences are. Own who you really are. And you can start creating the vision of that. Sorry, that was oh, you said to turn your phone off. Sorry about that, Wendy. You start creating this vision, and it's really amazing that when you get everything down on paper and you see it all visually on paper, what you've created, it generally comes true.
Yeah.
It happens. It happens.
Love that.
The chances of it actually working out, because we've been working together and we've been hopefully ameliorating a lot of those voices that come into our heads saying we shoulda, woulda, coulda, right? It's the shoulda, woulda, coulda. Bowles calls that the safekeeping self. And I
Mhm.
talk a lot about that. What keeps you safe? Well, working with me, you're not going to be safe in that way anymore.
You're going to be a detective.
You're going to be a detective, and you're going to have a cheerleader and a support person to help you recognize who you really are and own it.
So valuable.
Yeah.
So, Shell, I always like to ask my guests if they have one or two takeaways that they'd like to leave with the Hey Boomer audience today.
Yeah. I'm going to check my notes because I put something really cool down here.
The joys of live broadcasting.
The joys of live broadcasting. Okay. So I just want to say that basically, I want to leave you with this, that you really do need to figure out how, not figure out, but own who you are. And I am happy to speak with you. And if you are working now in a job that you hate or you don't like, or you kind of have a feeling isn't right for you, it's not you. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just in the wrong job. And it is never too late as a boomer or anybody, and I do work with boomers in case you were wondering. It's never too late to rediscover yourself. I know Wendy's offering something. We were talking maybe about how we could match up along and maybe work together a little bit, but it's never too late to find your way by discovering who you are and what your preferences are in all aspects of your work. It's never too late. And then again, by owning it, you can change everything. And I'm happy to speak with you if you're interested in exploring the maybe changing things up a little bit. And guess what? Your real life's work waits. It's waiting for you.
Thank you. That's great. Okay, so it's never too late and own it.
Own it.
Yeah.
Do not apologize.
And June says if it isn't written, which is, I guess, relating to all of the stuff that you were talking about writing, then it doesn't happen. So that's true. Thank you, June.
Well, it happened. I'll say this about writing things down. It has probably exponentially better chance of it actually happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let me tell you about my guest for next week. And she, so.
Do I get to stay on and listen?
Yeah, please. So we mentioned at the beginning, October is ADHD Awareness Month. It is also Domestic Violence Month. And my guest next week is Annette Johnson, who has had an amazing corporate career in leadership development, diversity, and inclusion. But she also grew up in a household where her mother was a victim of domestic violence. And she did not realize the impact this had on her personally until she almost was ready to leave her career. And she started learning more about herself. She went through some counseling and coaching, and she now works with women and children as an advocate and to improve their lives as well, that, you know, women and children that have experienced this. And she also wrote a book called Forgive and Love Yourself. So a very important discussion. She's a wonderful speaker and person, and I think you all will enjoy listening, even though it's a tough topic to talk about. Shell, so fun talking to you. This has been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah.
I think this is the first time I've done a live stream. I've done a lot of ones where it was recorded, but yeah, so this is nice.
Yeah, this was good. So I always like to end with a quote from C.S. Lewis. And he said, "You are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream." So thank you for joining me today. Thank you, all of you. I am so grateful for this Hey Boomer community. And my name is Wendy Green. And this has been Hey Boomer.